Welcome to Good Grief, the podcast where resilience meets reality. I'm your host, Dr. Christine Malone. In this podcast, we delve deep into the stories of individuals who've triumphed over tragedy, adversity, and trauma. In every episode, we bring you raw and honest narratives from guests who faced life's most challenging moments head on. Through candid conversations, they share their journeys of resilience, shedding light on the strategies, mindset shifts, and support systems that empowered them to rise above their darkest hours. Join us as we explore the profound depths of human resilience and discover how, even in the face of life's toughest trials, there can be light, growth, and yes, good grief. Okay, listeners, thank you so much for joining me for this episode today. My guest is Dr. Kyle Elliot. He is the founder of caffeinatedkyle.com and a trauma-informed career coach. Specializes in helping tech executives find jobs they love, and he also helps people with career-related trauma, such as workforce bullying, poor management, and job loss. So, Kyle, if you would please just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you and the work that you do.
Yes, as you shared, I'm a trauma-informed career coach. So I help people find jobs they love. And then when they're in jobs perhaps they're not loving, help them navigate that as well. So it's very fun, rewarding, challenging work that I get to do each day with tech executives.
Yeah. Is it mostly tech executives you work with, or do you do like career coaching for other genres as well?
Primarily tech executives. About three-quarters of them are tech executives or in other competitive, challenging, difficult fields as well.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I know you're in California too, so there's probably a big population for that down there as well. Of course, here up here in Seattle would probably be as well. So how did you get into this? I mean, what was it that made you want to go down this route? I mean, doesn't seem like a career choice one would think, you know what I want to do. So how did
Yes. 100% by accident. Even the month before I left my full-time job to do this, I renewed my contract at the university. But back in 2012, 2013, I was in college. I wanted to make extra money for coffee at Starbucks. I love coffee. I wanted to make money for Subway sandwiches. So I said, you know what? Maybe I can review resumes. I'm good at that. I can edit people's personal statements. So I went on Fiverr and literally charged $5 to do that. Once Fiverr took their cut, I got like $3.75.
Mhm.
So if I did 4 gigs an hour, I made 15, $20 an hour. And my dad's advice, he doesn't remember this, but every time I had a wait list, I would double my prices. So $5 to $10, 10 to 20. Fast forward 6 or 7 years and I had a waiting list. I was doing like 30 hours a week. And I ended up leaving that full-time job. I was at a university at that time, and I left that to do that full-time. And I transitioned from resume reviews to resume writing to about 4 years ago, really coaching and a focus on mental health and trauma over the last few years.
That's quite the road to get there. So tell us a bit about, I mean, I'd like to understand more about career-related trauma. So what is that? What does that look like? How does it come? How do we come by it? How do I find that spot?
Yeah, it's unfortunate for a lot of people. It's an accident that they land themselves in, and they often say, "Oh, I didn't realize I'm having this trauma at work," when they come to me. And sometimes it's not even during our until our consultation, they say, "Oh, I realize a lot of this is this trauma at work. It's workplace bullying, perhaps, or it's the trauma of losing their job." They say death, divorce, and job loss are three of the most traumatic things that can happen in life.
Yeah.
We live in a capitalist society. So what happens when you lose your job? Sometimes you can lose your house. You're not able to put food on the table. It's very traumatic.
Yeah.
It could be that you have a toxic boss. There's a lot of trauma that's happening within the context of our careers. So
Yeah.
when we're having a difficult time at work where we spend 40, 50, 60, 80 hours a week, these tech executives, that's going to impact every aspect of our lives, not just our careers.
Yeah, it's very stifling too. I'm thinking of one boss in particular who was quite the micromanager, and how stifling that was. It's like none of us were feeling like they wanted to contribute to innovation or anything, because the micromanaging was just so, I don't know how oppressive, I guess is the word I want to use for that it really was not okay. And I know a lot of times, I know in jobs that I've had where I have been unhappy, I didn't even realize how unhappy I was until I wasn't there anymore. So I think to some of the people who come for you, I mean, you mentioned they're like, oh, I do experience that, where it's like, I didn't even realize I'm in this toxic place until you tell me what a toxic place is.
Yeah, people think it's okay. I've had clients and they say, "Hey, is it normal for the CEO to be screaming at us? Is it normal to be crying in meetings? Is it normal to have someone call me at 2 a.m.?" No, none of that's normal. However, if that's all you've known, if that's all that's normal in your industry, or if adults are doing this,
Yeah.
you start to believe that it's okay and that even perhaps you deserve that, that it's warranted. So
Yeah.
sometimes it takes an outsider, a coach to say, no, this isn't okay. And we have to start taking steps to cope with this, to manage this, to regulate those feelings and emotions that come up when you're at work and when you start to look for something better that
Yeah.
you deserve.
So, can you share with us, like, without naming names, an example or two of somebody that you've worked with and kind of what it was they were trying to work through and what your process was?
Yeah, usually people come to me in two types of situations. One is where they're in that toxic work environment and they're saying, perhaps there's parts of this I like. I have a lot of great experience. I've done some really great stuff, and this environment just isn't right for me. So I just can't be here anymore. I need to go find something else. And perhaps it's beaten them down. This current environment has really beaten them down. Maybe a toxic boss. Micromanaging is really common in that work environment, or it could be a workplace bully. So that impacts their confidence. It might lead to some feelings of imposter syndrome as they look for that next job. The other case might be a job loss, and then that can impact them as they go look for something new. There can be a lot of feelings of scarcity, or if they don't hear back when they apply for a job, or they don't hear back after they've had an interview, they start saying, oh no, I'm never going to hear back, and some catastrophizing can
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah, I would imagine. I don't know how many people in the tech industry this happens to, but I'm thinking about someone maybe who's been in a job for a long time, and now I'm back out in the workforce looking for a job after all this time, and I don't know how to look for a job anymore. And I don't know how those types of things. Do you get encounter those situations as well?
Most of my clients, that's a lot of my clients. One
Okay.
of my clients, I remember, I think it was like 98. It was when she had graduated from her MBA.
Yeah.
She went to career fairs, gave paper resumes, and then she's like, now I'm a VP at this company. The last time I looked for a job was 98 when I took my paper resumes.
Right.
How
Right.
do I look for a job? I've interviewed hundreds, if not thousands of people. And now it's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to look for a job. This is really scary, especially in the current job market,
Oh yeah.
the pandemic. We've had this recession, all of this. How do I look for something now? And now I have to put myself out there. So it can feel really personal when you go and look for those jobs. Like you're sharing your identity with someone. If they reject you, they're rejecting not just your experience, but you as a human and as a person.
Yes, and I think a part of the has always struck me with the, especially as we get further into technology and so on, well, definitely since '98, would be, job applications going through online, and there's, robots or computers or something that
Mhm.
is sifting through it to see if it even ever gets to a human to review that, and how intimidating that is. When I'd heard that, I thought that is absolutely, I have to somehow manage to impress a robot first before I get to a human. So is that kind of part of what you help them with as well?
Yeah, so just educating, as you and I were talking about before, my doctorate's in education. So part of it is coaching people, part of it is educating them on what the job market looks like, those applicant tracking systems, how these quote unquote AI robots work, just helping them know that. Because part of it's just scary, the not knowing. Like I
Yeah.
apply, and then what happens, Kyle? So educating people on the job search process, educating them on what a typical, I won't say normal, but a typical work environment looks like, educating them on maybe your current work environment is toxic. Yes, you did go through a trauma. So normalizing that for people is,
Yeah. So they don't, maybe if it comes up in the next workplace, they can recognize it sooner, or whatever, not
yeah.
fall into it. I know in some workplaces I've been in where there's been somebody who, a boss that shows poor behavior. As I shared, a lot of my background's in healthcare, so maybe it's a doctor who has this terrible, doctor syndrome, and they're just treating their employees poorly. I had one situation where I was losing staff like crazy, and I went to talk to the doctor, and she genuinely had no idea that she was being so toxic. I mean, it was like, and no one had ever talked to her about it. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, anyway, how do you?
That's the thing with toxic leaders. Sometimes it permeates because people are afraid to say something and give them feedback as
Yep.
well.
Yep.
My job is often on the side of that employee. So it's how do we manage you? How do we regulate your feelings and emotions? What actions can you take? And sometimes my person is the one that maybe can have some changes that they need to do as well. So managing that as well, what's in their
Yeah.
control.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for since that doctor I was just referencing, I think once it had been brought to her attention, then she was willing to change,
Mhm.
which made a big difference for the employees. But I thought that wasn't going to happen until somebody pointed it out to her, and
Mhm.
somebody had to be brave to point. And when you're the employee, I can think of a lot of times where I wouldn't feel comfortable going to the boss and saying, "Hey, when you're
Yeah.
yelling in the hallway, that's really doesn't make me feel good about myself, and I can't give my best service, or you're kind of a micromanager, and let me tell you why that's bothering me. I can see those conversations being really uncomfortable for a lot of people.
Yeah. And it's scary when you need a job and you're like, oh, what if something happens? What if they retaliate against me? That's really scary to give that feedback.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I know we're going to link in our podcast notes your website so people can find you and find out more about you. But if we have listeners who are in kind of a traumatic, hostile, whatever you want to call it, workplace, I mean, what kind of advice would you give to them, from the career trauma related coach point of view?
Boundaries. I think boundaries are critical. A lot of people talk about boundaries. What's often missing is that it's critical to communicate them. What people say is, oh, they need to respect my boundaries. And one of my questions for clients is, have you communicated those boundaries? Yes, other people need to respect those boundaries that you set, but it's important. Have you communicated those boundaries to people? They're like, oh, my boss is messaging me after hours, or they're asking me to do this.
Yeah.
My question is, have you communicated your boundaries?
Yeah.
So that's a first step for a lot of people I would encourage is to make sure you're communicating your boundaries clearly and consistently to people. So are they clear boundaries? Is it really easy for someone to follow them? And then are you being consistent as well? Are you not waffling on them or changing those boundaries or expectations you have of your boss, of your colleagues, of your direct reports, depending on the situation?
Yeah, because I know, and especially with a lot of us who work from home, it's kind of that work-life balance has completely slid off the table.
Mhm.
Speaking for myself with COVID, it's like I work more now than I did before COVID. So it's like it's hard to put boundaries on that. So, and I know a lot of the people I've worked with are like, if I email on the weekends, nobody says, oh, you should be taking the time. They're more than happy to have me working for them on the weekends, right? It's like they'll take all you can get. So I think that word boundaries is resonates for me. I also use the term managing expectations and say,
Ah,
make sure that you are clear on what you expect from them and what they can expect from you, so that we don't have this, oh, I sent it to you and thought you'd get back to me in 24 hours. Well, you sent it to me on Friday night at midnight and I was checked out for the weekend, which I deserve
yes.
to be, whatever. Those types of things I really think are, again, communication is always, how do we have this communication to really get ourselves clear on that? But yeah, that's all good. So you've been an absolute great guest. I really have appreciated all the things you've shared with us. Do you have anything else you'd like to share before we end today?
The other thing is self-care. I think as you take care of yourself in this traumatic environment, if you're going through one or a toxic one, is to look at the ways you're caring for yourself. And are those ways you're caring for yourself, especially in our last few years of the pandemic, of us being isolated? Are they things that are boosting your energy or are they zapping it? And maybe you have to adjust it. I know for me during the pandemic, it was a lot of Netflix and Hulu and stuff. In
Yep.
the first hour or two, it boosts my energy. It's really helpful. But after hour three, four, five, it can be zapping.
Yep.
So taking an inventory and looking at those activities, looking at the people around you at work, outside of work, what are those things that are actually caring for you, that are boostful for you and helpful, and which ones are zapping, and doing a regular inventory
Yeah.
can be really
Yeah.
helpful as well.
Yeah, that really, I mean, I have often tell my students that I didn't until I was probably about 40 realize that, working in a miserable work environment wasn't good. I spend more time at work than I do with my family, for example. So why, in what I consider to be my one life, why am I spending any of that time with this miserable space when I could be someplace else? So, but again, I was 40 before I finally got there. So it's like when I talk to people now, same thing with what you're saying is really look at it and is this really where you want to be? Because your skills could be somewhere else. It's not like you don't have value somewhere
Mhm.
else. And I think as you'll probably have experienced, people are worried about change, right? I mean, it's like I'm fearful of what's out there. Is it going to be worse than what I've got today, and so on. So that's kind of those fear factors I think come into play.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Kyle, thank you again so much for being a guest today. I really appreciate your time and thanks for what you do. I know there's got to be a lot of demand out there for what you do. So it's like, I hadn't thought about it in my miserable job. So I'm thinking I should have reached out to a darn trauma-informed coach, but now I know, but now I work for myself. So there's that.
Thank you for having me. This was a lovely conversation.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Good Grief. We hope that stories shared today have inspired and empowered you on your own journey of resilience. If you want to dive deeper into the themes of trauma, tragedy, and survival, be sure to check out my memoir, The Day I Became the Spider Killer, a memoir of trauma, tragedy, and survival. In this book, I shared my own raw and honest experiences, offering insights and strategies for overcoming life's toughest challenges. You can purchase the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or listen to it on Audible. Your support helps us continue to bring these powerful stories to light and spread a message of hope and resilience. Stay tuned for more incredible stories on our next episode. Until then, remember, even in the face of life's toughest trials, there can be light, growth, and good grief.